I am not in a position to accuse anyone of anything, and I'm not accusing anyone of anything. I'm merely saying, in the last year of Mike and Mike, I remember we learned about something called Occam's razor. And what Occam's razor is the concept that when you need to offer an explanation for something, any phenomenon that takes place, the likeliest explanation for it is usually the explanation for it. Not always. So are there circumstances in which someone, look, have people had $4.5 million embezzled from them, stolen from them in the history of mankind? Absolutely. Have they had it wire transferred, which so many people have to be aware of? I mean, I'm just telling you, for me to transfer $5,000 to you requires like 6 people signing off on it. I have to have like 2 things on my phone that I approve and all that kind of stuff. So how in the world does someone just transfer $4.5 million of his money and he has no idea of it? I'm sorry, I don't believe it.
And best I can tell, there has still been zero explanation provided for any of that. And that is, of course, the most important thing here. Ohtani can say all he wants about his lack of knowledge and about his not betting on baseball or anything else. Like, it's easy to say, and that's what he's doing. He's doing the easy thing. He's doing the right thing. He's doing the thing he needs to do. But we actually have the paper trail. We have the electronic paper trail.
Right.
And if you can't provide us an answer on that, then none of the rest of it matters.
Yeah.
Because that's the actual thing that matters.
Because as I'm thinking this through, and Cam, I'll be to you in a second, as I'm thinking this through, I could easily see Ohtani himself maybe not having to be made aware of this. But someone would. A friend/translator would not be a person who would have the authority, I find it very hard to believe, to just wire transfer $4.5 million from his accounts. Someone else, someone whose job isn't interpreter, but someone whose job is business manager, like financial manager, financial planner, estate wealth, whoever these people are who handle his money, someone would have to have known and would have called and said, hey, why are $4.5 million being transferred to this bookmaking operation? It's almost impossible for me to believe that no one would have known this.
Ohtani takes in upwards of $100 million a year, not even with baseball contract. Like,
right.
Just being Ohtani. How many people do you think he either employs or he pays to help handle his affairs?
A lot. If he probably has a bank, whether it's Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, a Japanese bank, I have no idea. And within that, there are multiple people, probably dozens of people who are working on various areas of his wealth, which is enormous. And the idea that this could escape all of them, that money could actually be transferred from that. Like, that's the worst way. If you're going to try and steal money from someone, transferring money directly from their account is by far the worst way to do it. You're better off sneaking into their room while they're sleeping and hoping they have that much cash sitting around.
And he's not transferring the money to Panera Bread. He's transferring it to an illegal bookmaking place in California.
Yeah.
It's
like a very bad crime. Like, this is a poorly thought out crime, if indeed that's what it was. Cam, you had something.
What I keep going back to, and I know this, I said this yesterday, but I feel the need to restate the fact that it wasn't just Mizuhara that said that Ohtani covered the debts on Tuesday. Someone from Ohtani's camp said this before the news story they had on Wednesday. Now what they're going with, or at least what Ohtani said, was someone reached out to a representative in my camp inquiring about my potential involvement in this sports betting, and then said Mizuhara never told him about that. So now they're painting Mizuhara out to be like the greatest con man of all time, that he's been deceiving Ohtani for years, lied on his resume, all this stuff. How? I know all this communication is filtered through Mizuhara to Ohtani, but how does not more than one person check with him before they put out Mizuhara for an interview? Hey, by the way, we're saying, and Mizuhara is saying, that you covered these debts. He's going to have this interview for 90 minutes telling everyone all about it. You're not going to know about it until tomorrow in the meeting when he gets fired and addresses the team. That's the part that most doesn't add up. It wasn't just Mizuhara saying that Ohtani covered the debts. It was someone who represents Ohtani, maybe the worst representative of all time, if that's what they're getting into. But someone from his camp said it first.
So, again, where we find ourselves is in a delicate place, because I'm not in a position to accuse anyone of illegal activity or anything, and I obviously don't know what happened. But the story, as it is being described to us, as it is being explained, is extremely difficult for me to believe. perhaps not impossible, but close. If any player wanted to take part in something like this, it would have been done in the shadows and the darkness. The bets would have been placed offshore or with some not reputable illegal bookie, and it is much less likely that this would have been discovered, that they would have gotten caught. I think I told you, I did, because of a family connection, the first interview with the central figure of the Arizona State University basketball point shaving scandal. He's just someone that I happen to indirectly know. And when he got out of jail, I interviewed him for ESPN. And he told me the story very, very simply. He was a small-time college bookie at Arizona State. He just took bets for someone. I don't know who. And he took bets. And one of the basketball players on the team, Steven Smith, who was like the star point guard on the team, was betting on other stuff, not on basketball, not on his own teams or anything. Just ran up some debt, a couple of $1,000, not hundreds of thousands of dollars, just a few $1,000, betting on hockey, I think it was, or something else. And he lost some money to him. He owed him some money. And the person who told me this story said to me that the basketball player just looked at him and said, "Man, I wish there was some way we could just make this go away." And that their eyes just met, and it was as simple as that. They did it. And it was a miracle that it was caught, because they did it so many times, they did it so repeatedly, and he told so many people he was doing it that it wound up attracting all this attention, and these huge gamblers started putting huge bets on it. But if it had only been the two of them, and they had been betting $1,000 at a time, then there was almost no way that would ever have been caught. So what I'm trying to say is, when you bring these things from the shadows into the light, I think that the good of that outweighs the bad of that.
That's a very well-made point. What I would argue in response, though, is that the NBA in this case, or the professional sports leagues at large, their embrace of legalized gambling, which has brought in almost incalculable revenue, has mainstreamed this. And so while you could certainly have done this before and potentially had a better chance of getting away with it, the amount of just general interest has exploded recently. So the applicant pool went from being like a select few degenerate types to literally every friend that I have.
Right.
So I am totally on board with the fact that we have the checks and balances in place to deal with this when this happens. But we also need to accept the fact that this is going to happen. And Jontay Porter is the exact kind of player for whom it sort of matches it all. He's not made a ton of money. The props are super low. He kind of controls his own playing time. And so I don't think we should be surprised if and when this thing happens again.
Fine. I think that's right. I think that's fair. And I think those two things don't necessarily contradict each other.
No,
what
they
I
don't.
said and what you said aren't necessarily contradictory to each other. I have been in favor of the legalization of gambling for a long time. People who listen to me doing local talk shows in Chicago in the early 90s heard me saying that. And I am not one who believes that we should make things illegal just because they are dangerous and bad for you. Smoking cigarettes is extremely dangerous, extremely bad for you. It's not illegal in this country. We warn people about the dangers. It says right there on the packaging, this is really bad for you. Do it at your own risk. We must do the same thing with gambling. We must make it clear. Every advertisement that we do, that I do, says, if you're having problems with this, call 1-800-GAMBLER. I say it over and over and over again. If you ever find yourself inclined to gamble with money that you cannot easily afford to lose, stop. And if you can't stop, get help immediately, because it can be a terrible thing. It can ruin your life, but it doesn't have to.